Welcome to Policing TV. Each week, we will explore the highlights from our latest videos, diving into topics like AI, technology, drugs, and the people shaping the future of policing. In this first clip of the week, Mick Willing shares the challenges of leaving policing after 30 years, missing out on the commissioner role, and rediscovering purpose through new roles in Accenture and Fortem, highlighting identity, resilience, and service beyond the badge.
It's a challenging time, Bernard. So, as you rightly say, I threw my hat in the ring to be the New South Wales Police Commissioner. A process was run towards the end of 2021. There were three of us interviewed finally for the position. I was the preferred applicant. The panel picked me as the preferred applicant. My name went up to government for sign off, literally as one Premier resigned and another Premier came in New South Wales, and after a period of time decided to go in a different direction and chose another one of my colleagues to be the New South Wales Police Commissioner. I knew at the time that was going to be challenging for both the new Commissioner and myself, given the circumstances. And ultimately, the new Commissioner wanted to pick her team, and I wasn't going to be part of that team. So, I left the organisation with a heavy heart, to be honest, and thought, okay, now what? Now what do I do? I knew I had a good CV, a great network, all those different things, and as police leaders do, different capabilities. But converting that into a second and third and fourth, whatever career was a challenge in itself. So I reached out to different people and engaged a very good sort of CEO transition coach to work with and sort of to really sort of hone in on what it was that I wanted to do. And a long story short, I was connected with a global consulting company, Accenture, a US-based company, but with 800,000 employees, but a large practice in Australia and New Zealand, and they asked me to come in and establish a national security and public safety focused practice area. So Accenture is a technological-based company, consulting company. Many would suggest I'm a Luddite and I'm not very technologically proficient, but it was a completely different set of circumstances for me. So I felt that I had to sort of start from scratch again. I had the connections and that sort of stuff across the intelligence community and law enforcement, but, consulting and working in the private sector was something different. And I learned a hell of a lot. I stayed with Accenture for a couple of years. I was deeply missing purpose, the purpose that I had whilst in policing, even though I was working alongside police and intelligence officials. I missed it. During my time at Accenture, I became connected with Fortem Australia, with a role that an organisation that I currently lead. And I'll get to what that does in a second. But Fortem Australia had an advisory board. It was chaired by a good friend of mine, former Australian Federal Police Commissioner Andrew Colvin. And Andrew rang me and said, look, he needed to step aside from that role because of some work that he was doing in the private sector, which was conflicting with, some funding sources, and asked me whether I'd take over as the advisory board chair. And I did that. And Fortem Australia provides support to first responders and their families, mainly in the form of clinical or psychological support around wellbeing and resilience, also career management and social connection type activities. And for me, it was purpose, because I was sort of back dealing with things and dealing with people who I felt had similar experiences to what I was feeling. And that was that, almost loss of identity, that sort of connection that was so deep in me from policing. And I was missing it terribly.
In this next clip, Suhail Mirza explains his concept of inclusive wellness, drawing on global traditions and his own journey, to show how officers can move beyond coping to find resilience, meaning and purpose in their work and lives.
Sorts of challenges that there are, Suhail. What's mindful of that wider experience, what sorts of things would you be hoping and expecting that policing, what sort of support would you hope and expect that policing would provide to its officers and staff? What sorts of areas would you feel that your own particular experience of those and those of colleagues of yours would lend itself to providing further support in this area?
That's a great question, and I think three things I wanted to comment on, because you've typically covered a lot of great things there in your analysis. I think the first point is the analogy between the police force and the NHS is very, very similar. I mean, the NHS is driven by very high public spirited people helping people at the very complex times. And I think policing is very much the same, as you say, sometimes the most difficult situations that they have to face. Similarly, and depressingly so, people in the NHS face physical assault and bullying and harassment. And I think the National Wellbeing Survey from the College of Policing a few weeks ago found, shockingly for me, because I'm not the expert here in policing, 1 in 3 police officers facing physical assault here in the UK. I mean, it's astounding. So I think the idea that we need support for our police officers and our frontline staff in any arena, I think is essential. I think it's Andy Marsh, who you'll know, said that actually it's well-being in policing is not a luxury, it's an absolute necessity. And I think Gavin Stevens talked about the fact that he found this deeply worrying, some of these stats. So what would I expect? So good employers, good organizations will firstly recognize and give parity of esteem to the idea that mental health challenges can be as damaging and difficult to traverse as physical challenges. That's the first thing. There's got to be a culture of acceptance, because actually it is a tough occupation. People are expected to go through really quite resilient barriers, but at the same time, they have to have a safe space where they can actually say, this is overwhelming, I need support. So physically, I think there has to be that environment where you're actually working. You need the policies and support, and actually tools that allow people to have expert advice, because there's a variety of things along the spectrum. You may need specific psychiatric, psychological, therapeutic support for particularly hard woven embedded challenges, and I think that's a very important pathway. As you can imagine, Bernard, the NHS has so many psychologists, psychiatrists and therapists. Where I come in, I take an inclusive approach to well-being and wellness. So I work with NHS trusts, which have got a plethora of all these mental health experts, but my area is that those pathways are fabulous, but by definition they take time, because obviously it's a particular pathway. What about tomorrow? What about the end of the shift? What about going home, as you said, to family and friends, or on our own? What steps can we take to manage and get more of the emotions we want, less of the emotions we don't want? And that inner voice, which can be horrendous, can be our biggest foe. How do we manage and quieten that down so it's more supportive? So that's the area where my work as an inclusive wellness speaker and coach has played a big part, NHS and the private sector.
In this final clip, Commissioner Pete O'Doherty explores the major challenges facing policing, tight budgets, trust and global crime, while highlighting opportunities in reform, culture and innovation, including creative prevention like the City of London's phone snatching campaign.
Start with the challenges, because they are a precursor to opportunity. But as we know, the world feels a bit unstable at the moment. And as you know, what happens in the world around us directly impacts policing and the demand that we have to respond to. And at the moment, finance is a big challenge. There is no new money. Government carries significant debt from COVID, Brexit. It wasn't until 2015, allegedly, the UK government paid off its debt from World War II. So there is an ever-pressing need for policing to drive efficiencies, collaborate more, and we'll come back to that. So there is no new money. Second of all, of course, you've got trust and confidence. We still have, there is still a big need to improve trust and confidence in policing, particularly with underrepresented communities in policing. There's a lot of work to be done there, and we police by consent. So if we don't have the support of communities, automatically means we can't be as effective as we need to be. Then you've got the continued globalization of goods, people, services. You've got conflict worldwide. So we've got the situation in Israel, Gaza, Palestine. We have Russia, Ukraine, impacting cybercrime. I can keep on going. So all of this is significant. And I think lastly for policing, cops want to feel supported by public and government. And I think some cops out there are trying to do a good job, but some don't feel that they get the support that they need. And all of that are challenges, but it does mean there are big opportunities ahead, right? So the model of policing is a model that's been designed in the 1960s, apart from a number of regional collaborations. So through government's ambitions on reform, and there are significant ambitions to reform policing, there is a big opportunity here to change the policing model. And I do think that particularly digital data technology services should be nationalised for policing. I think the time has come when we can't justify using different systems, maybe different technology. It's expensive and we're not giving the public value for money. So I think breaking down structures and support services, enabling services, is a big opportunity for policing. Second big opportunity, I think, is culture. We have amazing people joining policing, and I think we need to continue transforming culture and leadership so we get the best out of our people, motivated people using their skills and experience to affect change. I see that as a big opportunity as well. And I think third of all, partnerships, because particularly public sector partners are under the same pressure that we are as well around financing and technology. Big opportunities to collaborate more across various partnerships. And I think what we need to look at as a service is more evidence-based practice. So, we can keep responding to crime, or we can do stuff to actually address it and solve it. And I'll give you one last example before you ask the next question. Our communications team here recently have been involved in the phone snatching work we're doing. Now, don't get me wrong, Bernard, we're out there arresting people. We're working with the telecoms companies to kind of reduce this. We're doing everything we can. And our amazing corporate comms team recently said, well, let's try and prevent this. And so using crime data, they sprayed massive blue plaques on the ground all across the city of London saying, look up, look out, because a member of the public had their phone stolen from this location. One of many things we're doing around prevention. So these are all opportunities that need to be explored more.
Thank you for watching. Tune in next week.